Hello there, and welcome to this gentle exploration of the most complex structure in the known universe, the human brain. I'm so glad you've found your way here tonight, ready to discover the fascinating world inside your own head. Wherever you are right now, whatever thoughts are running through your mind, I want you to take a moment to simply notice them. Your brain is working right now, processing these words, creating meaning, generating the experience of consciousness itself. It's a remarkable thing, and tonight, we're going to explore it together. There's something deeply calming about learning how your brain works. Perhaps it's the realization that your thoughts and feelings aren't random, but are the result of billions of neurons communicating in intricate patterns. Perhaps it's understanding that many of the things you worry about, the anxieties and fears, are just your brain trying to protect you, doing its job perhaps a bit too enthusiastically. Or perhaps it's simply the wonder of it all. The fact that a 3-pound organ made of fat and protein can give rise to everything you've ever experienced. Every memory, every emotion, every dream. Tonight, we're going to journey through the landscape of your brain, exploring its structures, its chemistry, its mysteries. We'll talk about how it develops, how it learns, how it changes throughout your life. We'll discover why you dream, why you forget, why you feel the way you do. And we'll do it all in a gentle, relaxed way. Perfect for easing into sleep if you find comfort in these explorations. If learning about your brain helps you relax and understand yourself better, consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. It helps others discover this peaceful content too. But for now, just settle in, get comfortable. Take a deep breath. Your brain is about to learn about itself, and there's something beautifully recursive about that. Let's begin our journey into the most extraordinary thing in the universe. Your brain contains approximately 86 billion neurons. This number is staggering, almost impossible to truly comprehend. To put it in perspective, if you tried to count all the neurons in your brain at a rate of 1 per second, it would take you more than 2,700 years to count them all. Each of these neurons is a living cell, with its own machinery for producing energy, maintaining its structure, and communicating with other cells. Neurons are the fundamental units of the brain, specialized cells that transmit information through electrical and chemical signals. They come in many shapes and sizes, from tiny interneurons that connect nearby cells to long projection neurons that send signals across different regions of the brain. The sheer number of neurons allows your brain to process enormous amounts of information simultaneously, to store vast libraries of memories, and to generate the rich, complex experience of being you. But neurons don't work in isolation. Each neuron can connect with thousands of other neurons, creating a network of connectivity that defies imagination. If the number of neurons is impressive, the number of connections between them is truly astronomical. Leading us to our next fact. Each neuron connects to thousands of other neurons, creating trillions of connections. The connections between neurons are called synapses, and your brain contains somewhere between 100 trillion and 1,000 trillion of them. At each synapse, one neuron can influence another, either exciting it and making it more likely to fire, or inhibiting it and making it less likely to fire. This creates an incredibly complex network where information flows in intricate patterns, constantly changing as you think, learn, and experience the world. The pattern of connections in your brain is unique to you, shaped by your genetics, your experiences, your learning, and your memories. No two brains are wired exactly the same way, which is part of why each person is unique. The complexity of this network is almost beyond comprehension. If you tried to map all the connections in a single human brain, you would need to store more data than currently exists on all the computers and servers in the entire world. Scientists are working on creating partial maps of brain connectivity called kinetomes. But mapping a complete human brain at the level of individual synapses remains far beyond current technology. This vast network of connections is what allows your brain to do everything it does, from the simplest reflex to the most abstract thought. From recognizing a familiar face to composing a symphony, your brain uses about 20% of your body's energy, despite being only 2% of your body weight. The brain is an incredibly energy-hungry organ. Even though it's relatively small compared to the rest of your body, typically weighing about 1.4 kilograms or roughly 3 pounds, it consumes a disproportionate amount of resources. About 20% of the oxygen you breathe and 20% of the glucose in your blood go to fuel your brain. This high energy demand reflects the constant activity in your brain. Even when you're resting, when you think you're doing nothing, your brain is far from idle. Neurons are continuously maintaining their readiness to fire, pumping ions across their membranes, synthesizing neurotransmitters, and engaging in housekeeping activities. This baseline activity, sometimes called the brain's default mode, consumes most of your brain's energy. When you're actively thinking, learning, or problem-solving, your brain's energy consumption increases, but not by as much as you might expect, perhaps only 5 to 10% above baseline. This is because the brain is already working so hard just to maintain itself. The brain's high energy needs are one reason why glucose levels in your blood affect your cognitive function. When your blood sugar is low, you might find it harder to concentrate, to make decisions, or to control your impulses. Your brain is literally running out of fuel. This is also why sleep is so crucial. During sleep, your brain can shift some of its energy from active processing to maintenance and repair, cleaning up cellular debris and consolidating memories. Your brain is about 60% fat, making it the fattiest organ in your body. When people think about the brain, they often picture gray matter and neurons, but in terms of composition, your brain is mostly fat. About 60% of the dry weight of your brain is made up of lipids, fatty molecules that form the membranes of cells and the myelin sheaths that insulate neuronal connections. This fat is not like the fat stored elsewhere in your body for energy. It's structural fat, essential for the brain's function. The fatty membranes of neurons are what allow them to generate and transmit electrical signals. Myelin, a fatty substance that wraps around the axons of neurons, acts like insulation on electrical wires, allowing signals to travel faster and more efficiently. Without adequate myelin, neural communication slows down, which can lead to various neurological problems. The high fat content of the brain is one reason why dietary fats, particularly omega-3 fatty acids, are so important for brain health. These fats are incorporated into cell membranes and can affect the fluidity and function of neural tissue. The brain's need for fat is also why extremely low-fat diets can sometimes affect cognitive function and mood. Your brain needs fat to work properly, which is a comforting thought in a way. The organ that makes you you is soft, fatty, and delicate, yet capable of extraordinary things. It's a reminder that complexity and resilience don't require hardness or rigidity, but can emerge from soft, flexible, well-organized matter. The brain doesn't have pain receptors, so the brain itself can't feel pain. This seems paradoxical because we experience headaches, and we know that brain injuries can be devastating, but the tissue of the brain itself has no pain receptors, no nociceptors that detect damage. This is why neurosurgeons can perform brain surgery on awake patients, stimulating different areas of the brain to map function without causing pain. The patient might feel pressure or pulling sensations from the scalp and skull, which do have pain receptors, but not from the brain tissue itself. So where do headaches come from? Headaches are caused by pain receptors in structures surrounding the brain, the meninges, the protective membranes covering the brain, the blood vessels in and around the brain, muscles in the scalp and neck, and the skull itself. When these structures are irritated, inflamed, or under tension, they send pain signals. Migraines, for instance, involve changes in blood flow and inflammation of blood vessels and meninges. Tension headaches come from muscle tension in the head, neck, and shoulders. The brain processes these pain signals, creating the experience of a headache, but it's not the brain tissue itself that hurts. This odd feature of brain anatomy has important implications. It means that brain tumors often don't cause pain until they've grown large enough to press on other structures. It also means that damage to brain tissue from strokes or injuries might not be painful, even though the consequences can be severe. The brain's lack of pain receptors is a reminder that pain is not always a reliable indicator of damage. and damage doesn't always produce pain. The relationship between physical state and conscious experience is complex and mediated by the brain's interpretive processes. Your brain contains approximately 86 billion neurons. This number is staggering, almost impossible to truly comprehend. To put it in perspective, if you tried to count all the neurons in your brain at a rate of 1 per second, it would take you more than 2,700 years to count them all. Each of these neurons is a living cell with its own machinery for producing energy, maintaining its structure, and communicating with other cells. Neurons are the fundamental units of the brain, specialized cells that transmit information through electrical and chemical signals. They come in many shapes and sizes, from tiny interneurons that connect nearby cells to long projection neurons that send signals across different regions of the brain. The sheer number of neurons allows your brain to process enormous amounts of information simultaneously, to store vast libraries of memories, and to generate the rich, complex experience of being you. But neurons don't work in isolation. Each neuron can connect with thousands of other neurons, creating a network of connectivity that defies imagination. If the number of neurons is impressive, the number of connections between them is truly astronomical. Leading us to our next fact, each neuron connects to thousands of other neurons, creating trillions of connections. The connections between neurons are called synapses, and your brain contains somewhere between 100 trillion and 1,000 trillion of them. At each synapse, one neuron can influence another, either exciting it and making it more likely to fire, or inhibiting it and making it less likely to fire. This creates an incredibly complex network where information flows in intricate patterns, constantly changing as you think, learn, and experience the world. The pattern of connections in your brain is unique to you, shaped by your genetics, your experiences, your learning, and your memories. No two brains are wired exactly the same way, which is part of why each person is unique. The complexity of this network is almost beyond comprehension. If you tried to map all the connections in a single human brain, you would need to store more data than currently exists on all the computers and servers in the entire world. Scientists are working on creating partial maps of brain connectivity called connectomes, but mapping a complete human brain at the level of individual synapses remains far beyond current technology. This vast network of connections is what allows your brain to do everything it does, from the simplest reflex to the most abstract thought. From recognizing a familiar face to composing a symphony, your brain uses about 20% of your body's energy despite being only 2% of your body weight. The brain is an incredibly energy-hungry organ. Even though it's relatively small compared to the rest of your body, typically weighing about 1.4 kilograms or roughly 3 pounds, it consumes a disproportionate amount of resources. About 20% of the oxygen you breathe and 20% of the glucose in your blood go to fuel your brain. This high energy demand reflects the constant activity in your brain. Even when you're resting, when you think you're doing nothing, your brain is far from idle. Neurons are continuously maintaining their readiness to fire, pumping ions across their membranes, synthesizing neurotransmitters, and engaging in housekeeping activities. This baseline activity, sometimes called the brain's default mode, consumes most of your brain's energy. When you're actively thinking, learning, or problem-solving, your brain's energy consumption increases, but not by as much as you might expect, perhaps only 5 to 10% above baseline. This is because the brain is already working so hard just to maintain itself. The brain's high energy needs are one reason why glucose levels in your blood affect your cognitive function. When your blood sugar is low, you might find it harder to concentrate, to make decisions, or to control your impulses. Your brain is literally running out of fuel. This is also why sleep is so crucial. During sleep, your brain can shift some of its energy from active processing to maintenance and repair, cleaning up cellular debris and consolidating memories. Your brain is about 60% fat, making it the fattiest organ in your body. When people think about the brain, they often picture gray matter and neurons, but in terms of composition, your brain is mostly fat. About 60% of the dry weight of your brain is made up of lipids, fatty molecules that form the membranes of cells, and the myelin sheaths that insulate neuronal connections. This fat is not like the fat stored elsewhere in your body for energy. It's structural fat, essential for the brain's function. The fatty membranes of neurons are what allow them to generate and transmit electrical signals. Myelin, a fatty substance that wraps around the axons of neurons, acts like insulation on electrical wires, allowing signals to travel faster and more efficiently. Without adequate myelin, neural communication slows down, which can lead to various neurological problems. The high fat content of the brain is one reason why dietary fats, particularly omega-3 fatty acids, are so important for brain health. These fats are incorporated into cell membranes and can affect the fluidity and function of neural tissue. The brain's need for fat is also why extremely low-fat diets can sometimes affect cognitive function and mood. Your brain needs fat to work properly, which is a comforting thought in a way. The organ that makes you you is soft, fatty, and delicate, yet capable of extraordinary things. It's a reminder that complexity and resilience don't require hardness or rigidity, but can emerge from soft, flexible, well-organized matter. The brain doesn't have pain receptors, so the brain itself can't feel pain. This seems paradoxical because we experience headaches, and we know that brain injuries can be devastating, but the tissue of the brain itself has no pain receptors, no nociceptors that detect damage. This is why neurosurgeons can perform brain surgery on awake patients, stimulating different areas of the brain to map function without causing pain. The patient might feel pressure or pulling sensations from the scalp and skull, which do have pain receptors, but not from the brain tissue itself. So where do headaches come from? Headaches are caused by pain receptors in structures surrounding the brain, the meninges, the protective membranes covering the brain, the blood vessels in and around the brain, muscles in the scalp and neck, and the skull itself. When these structures are irritated, inflamed, or under tension, they send pain signals. Migraines, for instance, involve changes in blood flow and inflammation of blood vessels and meninges. Tension headaches come from muscle tension in the head, neck, and shoulders. The brain processes these pain signals, creating the experience of a headache, but it's not the brain tissue itself that hurts. This odd feature of brain anatomy has important implications. It means that brain tumors often don't cause pain until they've grown large enough to press on other structures. It also means that damage to brain tissue from strokes or injuries might not be painful, even though the consequences can be severe. The brain's lack of pain receptors is a reminder that pain is not always a reliable indicator of damage, and damage doesn't always produce pain. The relationship between physical state and conscious experience is complex and mediated by the brain's interpretive processes. Your brain generates enough electricity to power a small light bulb. The electrical activity in your brain is real and measurable. Each neuron generates tiny electrical impulses, and when billions of neurons are active simultaneously, they produce enough collective electrical activity to be detected outside the skull using electroencephalography or EEG. The voltage involved is small, measured in millivolts, and the total power is modest, perhaps 10 to 25 watts, roughly equivalent to a dim light bulb. But this electricity is not random noise. It's organized into patterns that reflect what your brain is doing. When you're alert and focused, your brain produces fast, low-amplitude beta waves. When you're relaxed with your eyes closed, it produces alpha waves, rhythmic oscillations around 10 cycles per second. In deep sleep, your brain generates slow, high-amplitude delta waves. These electrical patterns are a window into brain function, and doctors use EEG to diagnose conditions like epilepsy, sleep disorders, and brain death. The electricity in your brain is generated by the movement of ions, charged atoms, across the membranes of neurons. When a neuron fires, sodium ions rush into the cell, creating a spike of positive charge that travels down the neuron's axon like a wave. This spike, called an action potential, is the basic unit of neural communication. The coordinated firing of many neurons creates the rhythms and patterns that characterize different brain states. There is something almost poetic about the fact that your thoughts, your consciousness, your sense of self, all arise from electrical impulses flowing through biological tissue. You are, in a sense, an electrical system, a remarkably complex one, generating patterns of activity that somehow give rise to the entire world of your inner experience. Information in your brain travels at different speeds, up to 268 miles per hour in some neurons. The speed at which signals travel through your nervous system varies depending on the type of neuron and whether it's covered in myelin. In unmyelinated neurons, signals travel relatively slowly, perhaps 1 to 2 meters per second, about walking speed. But in large myelinated neurons, signals can travel at speeds up to 120 meters per second, or about 268 miles per hour. This is faster than most cars on a highway. The variation in speed is not accidental, but reflects the different needs of different neural systems. Reflexes, for instance, need to be fast to protect you from danger. The neurons that carry pain signals and control rapid movements are heavily myelinated, allowing quick responses. On the other hand, the neurons involved in subtle processing, in integrating information, and making complex decisions don't need to be as fast and may be unmyelinated or lightly myelinated. The speed of neural transmission affects your perception of the world. Because it takes time for signals to travel from your sensory organs to your brain, and for commands to travel from your brain to your muscles, there's always a slight delay between events in the world and your experience of them. You're always living slightly in the past, experiencing the world as it was a fraction of a second ago. Your brain compensates for this delay in clever ways, predicting where moving objects will be and coordinating your movements to account for processing time. The fact that information travels at different speeds in different parts of your brain also means that your conscious experience is a carefully constructed synthesis, a seamless narrative your brain creates from signals that arrive at slightly different times. The unity of consciousness is an illusion, or perhaps better said, an achievement, something your brain constructs moment by moment from disparate pieces of information. Your brain creates new neurons throughout your life, a process called neurogenesis. For most of the 20th century, neuroscientists believed that you were born with all the neurons you would ever have, and that neurons lost to aging or injury could never be replaced. This dogma was overturned in the 1990s when researchers discovered that new neurons are born in certain regions of the adult brain, particularly in the hippocampus, a structure critical for learning and memory. This process, called neurogenesis, continues throughout life, though it slows with age. Every day, thousands of new neurons are born in your hippocampus, migrate to their final positions, extend connections to other neurons, and integrate into existing circuits. These new neurons are thought to be important for forming new memories, for cognitive flexibility, and for mood regulation. In fact, one theory of how antidepressant medications work is that they promote neurogenesis, helping to build new circuits that support more positive emotional states. Neurogenesis can be influenced by your behavior and environment. Exercise, particularly aerobic exercise, promotes the birth of new neurons. Learning new skills, engaging in mentally stimulating activities, and maintaining social connections also support neurogenesis. On the other hand, chronic stress, poor diet, lack of sleep, and social isolation can suppress the birth of new neurons. The discovery of adult neurogenesis was revolutionary because it showed that the brain is more plastic, more capable of change and renewal than anyone had imagined. You're not stuck with the brain you have. Throughout your life, your brain can grow, adapt, and to create new neurons, giving you the capacity to learn, to heal, and to change, even in old age. Sleep is essential for brain health and memory consolidation. During sleep, your brain doesn't shut off, but enters different modes of activity that are crucial for its health and function. One of the most important things that happens during sleep is memory consolidation, the process by which experiences and information from the day are transferred from temporary storage in the hippocampus to long-term storage in the cortex. During sleep, particularly during slow-wave deep sleep and REM sleep, The brain replays patterns of activity from the day, strengthening the connections that encode important memories and weakening irrelevant ones. This process is why a good night's sleep after studying improves your ability to remember information. Sleep also serves a housekeeping function. During waking hours, metabolic waste products accumulate in the brain. During sleep, particularly deep sleep, the glymphatic system, a waste clearance system in the brain, becomes more active. Cerebrospinal fluid flows through the brain tissue, washing away toxins, including proteins that, if allowed to accumulate, might contribute to neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's. Sleep deprivation has profound effects on brain function. After just one night without sleep, cognitive performance declines measurably. Attention, reaction time, decision-making, and emotional regulation all suffer. Chronic sleep deprivation is associated with increased risk of depression, anxiety, obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and neurodegenerative disorders. The brain needs sleep not as a luxury, but as a necessity, a time to repair, to consolidate, to prepare for the next day. Understanding this can help you prioritize sleep, recognizing that those hours of rest are not wasted, but are essential for your brain to function at its best. Dreams occur during REM sleep and may help process emotions. Dreaming is one of the most mysterious and fascinating aspects of brain function. While dreams can occur during any stage of sleep, the most vivid, narrative-rich dreams happen during REM, rapid eye movement sleep. During REM sleep, your brain is highly active, almost as active as when you're awake, but the pattern of activity is different. Areas involved in visual processing, emotion, and memory are activated, while areas involved in logical thinking and self-awareness are less active. This might explain why dreams are often bizarre, illogical, and emotionally intense. You experience them as real while they're happening, without the critical voice that says, "This doesn't make sense." The function of dreams is still debated. Some researchers think dreams are simply the brain's attempt to make sense of random neural activity during sleep. Others believe dreams serve important functions in processing emotions, consolidating memories, and working through problems. There's evidence that dreaming about a task or an emotional event can help you process and integrate the experience. People who are prevented from dreaming by being woken up every time they enter REM sleep show impairments in emotional regulation and memory. Dreams may also be a kind of mental simulation, a way for the brain to practice scenarios, to work through possibilities, to prepare for future challenges in a safe, imaginary space. The content of dreams often reflects your concerns, your fears, your desires, the things your unconscious mind is processing. Paying attention to your dreams can sometimes offer insights into your emotional state and preoccupations. Whether or not dreams have deep psychological meaning, they're certainly a window into the brain's creative, associative, and emotional processes. A nightly journey into the strange landscape of your own mind. Your brain has a negativity bias, paying more attention to threats than to positive experiences. From an evolutionary perspective, this makes sense. An ancestor who paid close attention to dangers, who remembered where the predators lurked and which berries were poisonous, was more likely to survive and pass on genes than an ancestor who focused on pleasant experiences but missed threats. This has resulted in brains that are wired to detect, focus on, and remember negative information more readily than positive information. Research shows that negative events have a stronger impact on your mood than positive events of equal intensity. Bad is stronger than good, as psychologists put it. You're more likely to remember criticism than praise, to dwell on failures rather than successes. Your brain scans the environment for threats, and when it detects something that could be dangerous, it triggers a cascade of responses designed to protect you. This negativity bias served our ancestors well in environments where threats were frequent and often deadly. But in modern life, where immediate physical dangers are relatively rare, this bias can work against you. It can make you focus on the negative aspects of situations, catastrophize about unlikely dangers, and feel anxious even when you're safe. Your brain is, in a sense, overprotective, responding to mild stresses with the same alarm systems designed for life or death situations. Understanding this bias can help you recognize that your anxious thoughts are not necessarily accurate reflections of reality, but are your brain erring on the side of caution. You can counteract the negativity bias through conscious effort by deliberately focusing on positive experiences, practicing gratitude, and challenging catastrophic thoughts. This doesn't mean ignoring real problems, but recognizing when your brain's threat detection system is in overdrive and gently recalibrating your perspective. Neuroplasticity allows your brain to reorganize itself throughout life. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change its structure and function in response to experience, is one of the most important discoveries in neuroscience. For years, scientists believed that after a critical period in childhood, the brain became fixed and unchangeable. But research has shown that the brain remains plastic, capable of significant reorganization throughout life. When you learn a new skill, your brain physically changes. Neurons that are used together strengthen their connections, following the principle that cells that fire together wire together. New synapses form, existing synapses strengthen, and the brain areas involved in the skill can actually grow larger. Studies of London taxi drivers, who must memorize thousands of streets, show that their hippocampi, the brain regions involved in spatial memory, are larger than those of non-taxi drivers. Musicians show enlarged areas of the brain involved in controlling the fingers and in processing sound. These changes are not just in children, but occur in adult brains as well. Neuroplasticity also allows the brain to recover from injury. After a stroke damages one area of the brain, other areas can sometimes take over the lost functions. This recovery depends on neuroplasticity, on the brain's ability to reroute information through new pathways and to reassign tasks to undamaged regions. The extent of recovery varies, but even years after an injury, intensive rehabilitation can lead to improvements as the brain slowly reorganizes itself. The flip side of neuroplasticity is that negative experiences can also reshape your brain. Chronic stress, trauma, and depression can lead to structural changes that perpetuate these conditions. But the positive side is that interventions like therapy, meditation, and learning can promote beneficial brain changes, helping to break negative patterns and establish healthier ways of thinking and feeling. Your brain is not fixed. It's a dynamic organ, constantly shaped by your experiences, your thoughts, and your actions. The left and right hemispheres of your brain have some specialized functions, but work together. Popular culture often exaggerates the differences between the left and right hemispheres, claiming that the left brain is logical and analytical, while the right brain is creative and intuitive. The reality is more nuanced. The two hemispheres are connected by a thick bundle of nerve fibers, called the corpus callosum, which allows them to communicate constantly. Most cognitive functions involve both hemispheres working together. That said, there are some lateralized functions. Language is primarily processed in the left hemisphere for most people, with specific areas like Broca's area and Wernicke's area playing crucial roles in producing and understanding speech. The right hemisphere contributes to language too, particularly prosody, the emotional tone and rhythm of speech. Spatial processing and facial recognition show some right hemisphere dominance, while fine motor control for the right hand is primarily managed by the left hemisphere. But these specializations don't mean you're left-brained or right-brained. You use your whole brain for virtually everything you do. The idea of left brain or right brain people is a myth not supported by neuroscience. Creativity involves the whole brain, as does logical thinking. The two hemispheres have evolved some specialized processing, which allows for greater efficiency, but they work as an integrated system. The corpus callosum ensures that information is shared, that the two hemispheres coordinate their activities, and that your conscious experience is unified. It's only in rare cases, such as when the corpus callosum is surgically severed to treat severe epilepsy, that the differences between the hemispheres become dramatically apparent. In these split-brain patients, the two hemispheres can process information independently, leading to fascinating insights into brain function, but also underscoring how abnormal such separation is. In your intact brain, left and right work together seamlessly. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for executive functions, doesn't fully mature until your mid-20s. The prefrontal cortex, located at the front of your brain just behind your forehead, is often called the brain's CEO. It's involved in executive functions like planning, decision-making, impulse control, and regulating emotions. This region allows you to think about the future, to weigh consequences, to inhibit inappropriate behaviors, and to work toward long-term goals. It's what makes it possible to delay gratification, to control your temper, to focus your attention, and to act in accordance with your values, rather than impulses. The prefrontal cortex is one of the last brain regions to fully mature, a process that continues until around age 25 or even later. This protracted development has important implications. Adolescents and young adults have prefrontal cortices that are still under construction, still forming connections and fine-tuning their function. This is part of why teenagers and young adults tend to be more impulsive, more prone to risk-taking, more emotionally reactive, and sometimes less able to consider long-term consequences. It's not that young people are irrational or incapable, their brains are simply still developing the neural machinery for sophisticated self-control and planning. This also means that the experiences you have during adolescence and early adulthood can shape your prefrontal cortex as it matures. Stress, trauma, substance use, and other experiences during this period can affect how this crucial brain region develops. On the positive side, learning, skill development, and positive relationships can support healthy prefrontal cortex maturation. Understanding this developmental timeline can foster patience and understanding, both for young people navigating this period and for adults reflecting on their own youth. Memories are not stored in one place, but distributed across the brain. When you remember something, you might feel like you're retrieving a file from storage, playing back a recording of the past. But memory doesn't work that way. Memories are not stored in a single location, but are distributed across many brain regions, with different aspects of a memory stored in different places. The sensory details of a memory, what you saw, heard, smelled, are stored in the sensory cortices that process those inputs. The emotional tone of a memory is stored in regions like the amygdala. The context, where and when something happened, involves the hippocampus. When you recall a memory, your brain reactivates these distributed patterns, bringing together the different components to reconstruct the experience. This means that memory is reconstructive, not reproductive. Each time you remember something, you're not playing back a recording but rebuilding the memory from its scattered pieces. This process is vulnerable to distortion. Details can be forgotten, misremembered, or even added from other experiences or suggestions. Every time you remember something, you slightly modify it, updating it with new information or current perspectives. This is why eyewitness testimony can be unreliable, why childhood memories are often inaccurate, and why two people can remember the same event differently. It's not that one person is lying or has a bad memory. It's that memory is inherently malleable. While this might seem like a flaw, it's actually adaptive. The reconstructive nature of memory allows you to update your knowledge, to generalize from experiences, to imagine future scenarios by recombining elements of past experiences. Your brain is not designed to be a perfect recording device, but a flexible system that learns, predicts, and adapts. Emotions are processed by the limbic system, including the amygdala and hippocampus. Emotions might feel like they come from your heart, but they're actually generated by your brain, specifically by a collection of structures collectively called the limbic system. The amygdala, an almond-shaped structure deep in the brain, plays a central role in processing emotions, particularly fear and anxiety. When the amygdala detects a threat, it triggers a rapid response, activating the fight-or-flight system before you're even consciously aware of the danger. This is why you might jump at a loud noise before realizing what it was. The amygdala is fast but not very discriminating, sometimes reacting to false alarms. The hippocampus, right next to the amygdala, is crucial for forming memories and also plays a role in emotional regulation by providing context. It helps you distinguish between a genuinely dangerous situation and one that just reminds you of something scary from the past. Other limbic structures include the hypothalamus, which regulates stress hormones, and parts of the prefrontal cortex, which help regulate emotions and integrate them with rational thought. Emotions are not separate from cognition, but deeply intertwined with it. Your feelings influence your thoughts, and your thoughts influence your feelings. Emotional regulation, the ability to manage and modulate your emotions, involves communication between the limbic system and the prefrontal cortex. When this communication works well, you can feel emotions without being overwhelmed by them, can respond to situations thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. When it's disrupted, as in anxiety disorders, depression, or trauma, emotions can feel uncontrollable. Understanding that emotions are brain processes, not mysterious forces, can help you approach them with curiosity and compassion. Your feelings are information, signals generated by your brain to guide your behavior, and while they're important, they're not always accurate or helpful. Learning to observe your emotions, to understand their neural basis, and to work with them rather than against them is a key part of emotional intelligence and mental health. Your brain creates your sense of self, but this self is more fluid than it feels. The experience of being a self, a continuous, unified person with a unique identity, feels fundamental. But neuroscience suggests that the self is a construction, something your brain creates rather than something that inherently exists. Different brain regions contribute to different aspects of self. The prefrontal cortex supports your ability to reflect on yourself, to think about your thoughts, to plan for your future self. The tempoparietal junction is involved in distinguishing self from other, in understanding that you're a separate entity from the people around you. The insula provides information about the state of your body, contributing to your sense of being a physical self located in space. Memory systems, particularly the hippocampus and cortex, provide the narrative continuity that makes you feel like the same person over time. All these processes work together to create the illusion of a unified, stable self. But this sense of self can be disrupted. In neurological conditions, people can lose the sense that their own limbs belong to them, can fail to recognize their own face, or can experience themselves as multiple, distinct identities. Even in healthy brains, the sense of self is more flexible than it seems. Your sense of identity changes depending on context, on who you're with, on your mood. In meditation, people sometimes experience a dissolution of the boundaries of self, a sense of merging with the environment, or losing the distinction between observer and observed. The self is not an unchanging essence, but a dynamic process, a story your brain tells itself. This might seem unsettling, but it can also be liberating. If the self is fluid and constructed, then you have more agency in shaping it than you might have thought. You're not stuck with a fixed identity, but can, through your choices, experiences, and conscious attention, influence who you become. The brain has specialized regions for different functions, but they work together as networks. When early neuroscientists began studying the brain, they discovered that damage to specific regions led to specific deficits. Damage to Broca's area in the left frontal lobe impaired speech production. Damage to the occipital lobe at the back of the brain caused blindness. This led to the idea of localization of function, that different parts of the brain do different things. This is true to an extent. The brain does have specialized regions. The occipital lobe processes vision. The temporal lobe processes sound and is important for memory. The parietal lobe processes touch and spatial information. The frontal lobe is involved in movement, planning, and executive functions. But modern neuroscience has revealed that brain function is not just about individual regions, but about networks, distributed systems of regions that work together. When you perform even a simple task, multiple brain regions activate and communicate. Recognizing a face involves the visual cortex, the fusiform face area, the amygdala for emotional content, memory systems for identifying who the person is, and more. These regions form a network, and it's the coordinated activity across the network that produces the function. Understanding the brain as a network helps explain why it's so resilient. If one part of a network is damaged, other parts can sometimes compensate. It also helps explain why complex functions like consciousness don't localize to a single spot but emerge from the integrated activity of many regions. The brain is not a collection of independent modules, but an interconnected system where everything influences everything else. This network architecture is part of what makes the brain so powerful and flexible, capable of adapting to new situations, learning new skills, and recovering from injury. Neurotransmitters are chemical messengers that influence mood, behavior, and cognition. Communication between neurons doesn't happen through direct electrical connection, but through chemical signals. When a neuron fires, the electrical signal travels down its axon to the synapse, the tiny gap between one neuron and the next. At the synapse, the electrical signal triggers the release of neurotransmitters, chemical molecules that float across the synaptic gap and bind to receptors on the receiving neuron. Different neurotransmitters have different effects. Glutamate is the main excitatory neurotransmitter, making neurons more likely to fire. GABA is the main inhibitory neurotransmitter, making neurons less likely to fire. These two work in balance to regulate the overall level of neural activity. Other neurotransmitters have more specialized roles. Dopamine is involved in reward, motivation, and pleasure. When you accomplish a goal, eat something delicious, or receive a compliment, your brain releases dopamine, which reinforces the behavior that led to the reward. Serotonin is involved in mood regulation, sleep, and appetite. Low serotonin levels are associated with depression, and many antidepressant medications work by increasing serotonin availability in the brain. Norepinephrine is involved in arousal, attention, and the stress response. Acetylcholine is important for muscle control and also plays a role in attention and memory. The balance and activity of these neurotransmitters influence every aspect of your mental life. Imbalances can contribute to mental health conditions, which is why many psychiatric medications target neurotransmitter systems. But neurotransmitter activity is also influenced by your behavior, your diet, your sleep, your stress levels, and your social interactions. Taking care of your brain means creating conditions that support healthy neurotransmitter function through good nutrition, regular exercise, adequate sleep, stress management, and meaningful connections with others. The brain is capable of attention but has limited capacity. Attention is the brain's way of selecting what to process deeply out of the overwhelming flood of information constantly hitting your senses. At any moment, your eyes are seeing a huge visual field, your ears are picking up countless sounds, your skin is feeling textures and temperatures, but you're consciously aware of only a tiny fraction of this input. Attention acts like a spotlight, illuminating some information while leaving the rest in shadow. This selectivity is necessary because your brain doesn't have the capacity to process everything in detail simultaneously. When you focus attention on something, the brain regions processing that information become more active. Neural signals are amplified, and you become consciously aware of it. Meanwhile, unattended information is processed less deeply or ignored entirely. This is why you can miss obvious things if your attention is elsewhere, a phenomenon called inattentional blindness. In famous experiments, people watching a video and counting basketball passes fail to notice a person in a gorilla suit walking through the scene. They're not blind. Their attention is just directed elsewhere. The brain's limited attentional capacity means that multitasking is largely a myth. When you think you're multitasking, you're actually rapidly switching attention between tasks, and each switch comes with a cost, reduced performance, and increased mental fatigue. Sustained attention on a single task is more efficient and produces better results. Understanding your brain's attentional limitations can help you work with them rather than against them. Minimizing distractions, taking breaks, and practicing mindfulness can all improve your ability to focus and to direct your attention intentionally rather than being at the mercy of whatever grabs it. Learning physically changes your brain's structure and function. Every time you learn something new, whether it's a fact, a skill, or an experience, your brain changes. At the most basic level, learning strengthens the connections between neurons. When neurons fire together repeatedly, the synapse between them becomes more efficient, making it easier for signals to pass from one to the other. This is called long-term potentiation, and it's the cellular basis of learning and memory. With repeated practice, entire circuits can be strengthened and refined. When you're learning a new skill, like playing an instrument or speaking a language, the process feels effortful and requires conscious attention. But with practice, the neural circuits become more efficient and the skill becomes more automatic. This is why practice matters so much for learning. Each repetition strengthens the neural pathways, making the behavior easier and more fluid. Physical changes accompany this functional plasticity. Brain regions involved in a learned skill can increase in volume, gaining new synapses, new connections, even new neurons in some cases. The white matter tracks that connect different brain regions can thicken as they're used more. These structural changes are visible on brain scans, providing tangible evidence that your brain is shaped by your experiences. The implications are empowering. You're not limited by the brain you were born with. Through deliberate practice, through learning, through challenging yourself, you can literally grow your brain, building new circuits and capabilities. This is true throughout life. While the young brain is more plastic, adult brains retain significant capacity for learning and change. You're never too old to learn something new, and every time you do, you're physically reshaping your brain in beneficial ways. The hippocampus is crucial for forming new memories, but not for storing them long-term. The hippocampus, a seahorse-shaped structure deep in the temporal lobe, plays a critical role in memory formation. When you experience something new, the hippocampus binds together the different elements of that experience, the sights, sounds, emotions, and context, creating what we call an episodic memory, a memory of a specific event. Without a functioning hippocampus, you lose the ability to form new explicit memories, a condition called anterograde amnesia. This was famously demonstrated in the case of patient H.M., who had his hippocampus surgically removed to treat severe epilepsy. After the surgery, he could no longer form new memories. He could remember his life before the surgery, but everything that happened afterward vanished within minutes. He lived in a perpetual present, unable to remember people he'd just met or conversations he'd just had. This tragic case revealed the hippocampus's essential role in memory formation. However, the hippocampus is not where memories are stored permanently. Over time, through a process called consolidation that happens largely during sleep, memories gradually transfer from the hippocampus to various regions of the cortex, where they're stored more permanently. This is why H.M. retained his old memories, even though his hippocampus was gone. The cortex can store memories without the hippocampus, but it needs the hippocampus to form them initially. The hippocampus is like a directory or index, pointing to where different aspects of a memory are stored across the brain. When you recall a memory, the hippocampus helps coordinate the retrieval, bringing together all the pieces. As memories age and consolidate, they become less dependent on the hippocampus and more firmly embedded in cortical networks. This is why recent memories are more vulnerable to disruption than old ones, a pattern called Ribot's Law. Understanding the hippocampus's role helps explain various memory phenomena and underscores how complex and distributed the memory system really is. Chronic stress can physically damage the hippocampus and impair memory. While short-term stress can actually enhance certain types of memory, helping you remember important or threatening events, chronic stress has the opposite effect. When you're stressed, your body releases cortisol, a stress hormone that prepares you for action. In the short term, cortisol is helpful, mobilizing energy and sharpening attention. But when stress becomes chronic, persistently elevated cortisol levels can damage neurons, particularly in the hippocampus. The hippocampus has many receptors for cortisol, making it especially vulnerable to the effects of chronic stress. Prolonged exposure to cortisol can cause hippocampal neurons to shrink, to lose dendritic branches, and even to die. This physical damage impairs the hippocampus's ability to form new memories and can lead to memory problems. Studies of people with post-traumatic stress disorder or chronic depression, conditions associated with prolonged stress, show reduced hippocampal volume on brain scans. The good news is that this damage is not necessarily permanent. When stress levels decrease, when cortisol returns to normal, the hippocampus can recover. New neurons can be born, surviving neurons can regrow their connections, and memory function can improve. This recovery is promoted by the same factors that support general brain health: exercise, good sleep, social connection, and stress reduction practices like meditation. The relationship between stress and the hippocampus highlights how deeply your mental state affects your brain's physical structure. Chronic stress is not just an unpleasant experience, but a threat to brain health. Conversely, managing stress is not just about feeling better in the moment, but about protecting your brain's long-term integrity and function. Meditation can change brain structure and function in measurable ways. Over the past few decades, neuroscientists have become increasingly interested in meditation, and research has revealed that regular meditation practice can produce significant changes in the brain. Studies of experienced meditators show increased thickness in the prefrontal cortex, the region involved in attention, self-awareness, and emotional regulation. The hippocampus, crucial for memory and emotional regulation, also shows increased volume in meditators. Meanwhile, the amygdala, involved in stress and anxiety responses, tends to show decreased volume in people who meditate regularly, suggesting reduced reactivity to stress. Functional brain imaging studies show that meditation alters patterns of brain activity. During meditation, there's increased activity in networks associated with attention and awareness, and decreased activity in the default mode network, the system active when your mind is wandering. People who meditate regularly show better ability to sustain attention, to notice when their mind has wandered, and to redirect focus. They also show enhanced emotional regulation, greater resilience to stress, and improved working memory. These changes don't require years of monastic practice. Even relatively brief periods of daily meditation, 20 to 30 minutes for 8 weeks, can produce measurable changes in brain structure and function. Different types of meditation, focused attention, open monitoring, loving kindness, may engage different neural systems and produce different benefits, but all seem to involve training the brain's attention and emotion systems. The fact that meditation can reshape the brain is a powerful demonstration of neuroplasticity and offers a practical tool for anyone looking to enhance their mental well-being. It shows that you have agency over your brain's development, that through intentional mental training, you can cultivate qualities like focus, calm, and compassion by literally changing your brain's wiring. The brain's reward system can be hijacked by addictive substances and behaviors. Your brain has a built-in reward system designed to motivate behaviors essential for survival: eating, drinking, socializing, reproducing. When you engage in these activities, neurons in the ventral tegmental area release dopamine in the nucleus accumbens, a key part of the reward circuit. This dopamine release creates a feeling of pleasure and reinforces the behavior, making you more likely to repeat it. This system works well when it's responding to natural rewards, which provide moderate dopamine increases. But addictive substances hijack the system, causing much larger dopamine surges than natural rewards ever could. Drugs like cocaine, methamphetamine, or opioids can increase dopamine levels 10 times or more above normal. This massive dopamine flood overwhelms the brain's natural reward system. Over time, the brain adapts to these unnatural levels by reducing the number of dopamine receptors or decreasing natural dopamine production. This means that normal activities no longer feel rewarding, a state called anhedonia, and the person needs the drug just to feel normal. This is the neurological basis of tolerance and dependence. The brain's plasticity, normally a strength, works against you in addiction. The neural circuits linking drug-related cues to the reward system become very strong. Places, people, or situations associated with drug use trigger intense cravings as these cues activate the reward system. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex's ability to exert control over impulses becomes impaired. Addiction is thus not a moral failing or a lack of willpower, but a brain disease, a condition where the brain's reward and control systems have been altered by repeated drug exposure. Understanding the neuroscience of addiction can reduce stigma and point toward more effective treatments that target the underlying brain changes, rather than simply demanding abstinence through willpower alone. Your brain is constantly predicting what will happen next. One of the most important things your brain does is prediction. Rather than passively receiving information from the senses and reacting to it, your brain actively predicts what it expects to happen based on past experience. It generates internal models of the world and constantly updates them as new information comes in. This predictive processing happens largely unconsciously. When you reach for a cup of coffee, your brain predicts how heavy it will feel, how hot, how much force you'll need to lift it. These predictions allow you to move smoothly and efficiently. When reality matches prediction, everything feels normal. But when there's a mismatch, when the cup is heavier or lighter than expected, you notice. The prediction error, the difference between what was predicted and what actually happened, is a signal that your brain uses to update its models. This predictive nature of the brain explains many perceptual phenomena. Optical illusions often work by exploiting your brain's predictions. Your brain fills in gaps in sensory information based on expectations, which is why you can read text with missing letters or recognize faces in clouds. Prediction also underlies learning. When you're surprised, when something happens that you didn't predict, your brain pays attention and adjusts its models. This is why novelty is engaging and why repetitive, predictable experiences become boring. The brain is essentially a prediction machine, constantly trying to minimize surprise by building better models of the world. This has profound implications for how you experience reality. What you perceive is not a direct representation of the world, but a construction, your brain's best guess about what's out there based on sensory input and prior expectations. In a sense, you're always living in a simulation generated by your brain, a model that's usually accurate, but can sometimes be fooled or mistaken. Language is a uniquely human ability with dedicated brain regions. While other animals communicate, human language is unique in its complexity, flexibility, and generative capacity. You can produce and understand an infinite number of sentences you've never heard before by combining words according to grammatical rules. This remarkable ability depends on specialized brain regions, particularly in the left hemisphere for most people. Broca's area, in the left frontal lobe, is crucial for speech production and grammatical processing. Damage to this area results in difficulty speaking, though comprehension often remains relatively intact. Wernicke's area, in the left temporal lobe, is important for language comprehension. Damage here produces fluent but meaningless speech and impaired understanding. These regions are connected by a bundle of nerve fibers called the arcuate fasciculus, forming a language network. But language involves much more of the brain than just these classic language areas. The motor cortex controls the muscles involved in speaking. Auditory areas process speech sounds. Visual areas process written language. Semantic knowledge, the meanings of words, is distributed across many brain regions, with different categories of knowledge, animals, tools, actions, stored in different areas. The right hemisphere contributes to language too, particularly the emotional and prosodic aspects, the tone and rhythm that convey meaning beyond the literal words. The brain's capacity for language is partly innate. Children universally learn language rapidly without explicit instruction, suggesting specialized neural circuitry, but it's also shaped by experience. The languages you're exposed to during development literally change your brain, tuning neural circuits to the specific sounds, words, and grammatical structures of those languages. Learning multiple languages creates additional neural pathways and may provide cognitive benefits, including enhanced executive function and possibly delayed onset of dementia symptoms. Language is one of the defining features of human cognition, and understanding its neural basis reveals both the universality of language across cultures and the remarkable plasticity of the brain in acquiring linguistic knowledge. The brain continues to change and adapt throughout your entire life. While it's true that the brain is most plastic during childhood and adolescence, neuroplasticity continues throughout life. Your brain never stops changing, never stops responding to experience. Even in old age, the brain retains significant capacity for learning, for forming new memories, for adapting to new situations. This ongoing plasticity is why you can learn new skills at any age, why life experiences continue to shape you, why recovery from brain injury is possible even years after the initial damage. The nature of plasticity does change with age. Young brains are more flexible, more able to make large-scale reorganizations, which is why children recover from brain injuries better than adults and why early language exposure is so important. As the brain matures, it becomes more stable, more specialized, which improves efficiency but reduces flexibility. Adult plasticity is more constrained, more focused on refining existing circuits rather than building entirely new ones. But this doesn't mean adult brains can't change. Research consistently shows that adult brains are capable of significant structural and functional changes in response to learning, experience, and environmental demands. The key is engagement. To maintain and promote plasticity as you age, you need to keep challenging your brain, learning new things, engaging in novel experiences, staying socially and physically active. Mental and physical exercise, particularly activities that are challenging and require learning, promote plasticity and can help maintain cognitive function into old age. The phrase "use it or lose it" has neurological truth. Neural circuits that are used regularly are maintained and strengthened, while those that are neglected can weaken or be pruned away. Understanding lifelong neuroplasticity is empowering. It means that you're not locked into patterns established in youth. That change is always possible, that you can continue to grow, learn, and develop throughout your entire life. Sleep deprivation impairs judgment, and you often don't realize how impaired you are. One of the insidious aspects of sleep deprivation is that it impairs your ability to recognize that you're impaired. When you're sleep deprived, your cognitive performance declines measurably. Reaction times slow, attention lapses, working memory capacity decreases, and decision-making becomes worse. You're more likely to make errors, to overlook important information, to be impulsive, and to take unnecessary risks. Studies show that after being awake for 18 to 20 hours, your cognitive performance is equivalent to being legally drunk. Yet people who are sleep-deprived often feel they're functioning fine. They may notice feeling tired, but they underestimate how much their performance has declined. This metacognitive failure, the inability to accurately assess your own cognitive state, is itself a symptom of sleep deprivation. The prefrontal cortex, which is involved in self-monitoring and judgment, is particularly sensitive to sleep loss. Without adequate sleep, you lose not just cognitive capacity, but also the insight that you've lost it. This has serious implications. Sleep-deprived people may drive when they shouldn't, make important decisions without realizing their judgment is compromised, or insist they're fine when they're not. This phenomenon is part of why chronic sleep deprivation is so harmful. People may think they're adapting to less sleep, that they're functioning well on just 5 or 6 hours a night, but objective testing shows they're not. Their performance has declined even if they don't feel it. The brain needs adequate sleep not just to function, but to know that it's not functioning well. Recognizing this can help you take sleep deprivation seriously, not as a badge of productivity, but as a genuine impairment that affects every aspect of your cognitive and emotional life. Prioritizing sleep is not laziness, but essential maintenance for your brain's health and function. The prefrontal cortex acts as a brake on impulses and helps you make long-term choices. One of the prefrontal cortex's most important functions is inhibitory control, the ability to suppress impulses, to resist temptations, to delay gratification. This ability is crucial for long-term success and well-being. It allows you to study for a test instead of watching TV, to save money instead of spending impulsively, to hold your tongue instead of saying something you'll regret. The prefrontal cortex does this by exerting top-down control over other brain regions, essentially overriding the immediate impulses generated by limbic and reward systems. This control requires effort and uses mental resources. It's why resisting temptation feels hard, why willpower seems to deplete over time. The prefrontal cortex can only exert so much control before it becomes fatigued. Factors that impair prefrontal function, stress, sleep deprivation, alcohol, drugs, emotional arousal, reduce inhibitory control, and make you more impulsive. This is why you might make poor decisions when you're tired or stressed, eating junk food, saying things you don't mean, avoiding tasks you know are important. Understanding the prefrontal cortex's role in self-control can help you structure your environment and behavior to support it. Making important decisions when you're well rested, removing temptations from your environment rather than relying on willpower alone, and practicing stress management all help your prefrontal cortex function optimally. You can also strengthen inhibitory control through practice. Activities that require sustained attention, resisting distractions, or delaying gratification can improve prefrontal function over time, much like exercising a muscle. Meditation, in particular, has been shown to enhance prefrontal cortex function and improve self-control. The prefrontal cortex is what allows you to be the author of your life, to make choices based on values and long-term goals rather than being buffeted by every impulse and emotion. Supporting its function is key to living intentionally. Your brain creates the experience of consciousness, but how remains one of science's greatest mysteries. Consciousness, the subjective experience of being aware, of having thoughts and feelings, of being someone it feels like to be, is perhaps the most profound mystery in neuroscience. We know that consciousness depends on the brain. Damage to certain brain regions can alter or eliminate consciousness. Anesthesia can reversibly turn off consciousness. But how the physical processes in the brain, neurons firing, neurotransmitters binding to receptors, electrical currents flowing, give rise to subjective experience remains unexplained. This is called the hard problem of consciousness, distinguishing it from the easier problems of explaining specific cognitive functions. Neuroscientists can map which brain regions are active during particular conscious experiences, can identify neural correlates of consciousness, patterns of activity that correspond to awareness. For instance, consciousness seems to require not just activity in specific regions, but widespread communication and integration across the brain. Theories of consciousness emphasize this integration, suggesting that consciousness arises when information from many sources is brought together into a unified whole. But why integration produces the feeling of experience, why there's something it's like to be you, remains mysterious. Some philosophers argue that consciousness is fundamental, not reducible to physical processes. Others believe it will eventually be explained through neuroscience, once we understand the brain's complexity more fully. For now, the fact that your brain creates your entire conscious experience, every thought, every sensation, every emotion, without you having any direct access to how it does so, remains one of the most awe-inspiring aspects of being human. You are, in a sense, a miracle of neural organization, billions of cells somehow giving rise to the rich inner world of your consciousness. And now, as we approach the end of our journey through the brain, let your mind settle into a state of calm awareness. We've explored the intricate architecture of your brain, from its billions of neurons to its specialized regions, from its chemical messengers to its electrical rhythms. We've learned how it develops, how it learns, how it remembers and forgets. We've discovered how it creates emotions, consciousness, the sense of self. We've seen how it's shaped by experience, how it changes throughout life, and how vulnerable yet resilient it is. Your brain is working right now, processing these words, maintaining your breathing and heartbeat, balancing 1,000 different systems, predicting what comes next, creating your continuous experience of being alive. It's doing all this largely outside your awareness, a silent partner that's been with you every moment of your life. That is, in a very real sense, who you are. Understanding your brain doesn't diminish the mystery of consciousness or the richness of human experience. If anything, it deepens the wonder. The fact that matter, arranged in just the right way, can give rise to thought, to feeling, to awareness, is extraordinary. You are made of stardust organized into neurons, of atoms that were forged in ancient stars, now configured in patterns complex enough to contemplate their own existence. As you drift toward sleep tonight, your brain will shift its activity patterns, moving from the alert, focused state of waking through drowsiness into the deep, restorative stages of sleep, and eventually into the vivid dreamscape of REM. Throughout the night, it will work to consolidate the day's memories, to clear away metabolic waste, to prepare for tomorrow. Even in sleep, your brain never truly rests. It's always active, always maintaining the system that is you. There's comfort in understanding that your brain is not a fixed entity, but a dynamic, changing system. The anxieties you feel, the habits you wish you could break, the patterns of thinking that cause you pain, these are not permanent features of who you are, but are patterns of neural activity that can change. Through your choices, through practice, through attention and intention, you can reshape your brain, can build new circuits and strengthen new patterns. You are not at the mercy of your brain, though you are your brain. This paradox that you are both the observer and the observed, the controller and the controlled, is one of the beautiful mysteries of consciousness. You can choose to treat your brain well, to give it the sleep, nutrition, exercise, stimulation, and care it needs. You can work with your brain's natural tendencies rather than against them, understanding that it's biased toward negativity, but you can train it toward positivity, that it has limited willpower, but you can support it with good habits and environments. Thank you for taking this journey through the landscape of the brain with me tonight. I hope you found some insight, some peace, some appreciation for the remarkable organ that makes you who you are. May your dreams tonight be gentle and restorative, your brain quietly working through the day's experiences, preparing you for tomorrow. As you close your eyes and let sleep come, remember that your brain is taking care of you, has been taking care of you since before you were born, and will continue faithfully until your last moment. It's the most complex, most beautiful, most mysterious thing in the known universe, and it's yours. Sleep well and good night. Your brain will keep working while you rest, dreaming its electric dreams, weaving the threads of memory and imagination into the fabric of who you'll be tomorrow.